In the winter of 1959, 9 skilled hikers set out into the frozen wilderness of Russia's Ural Mountains and never returned. Days later, their campsite was discovered, and what rescuers found would disturb even the most seasoned investigators. Their tent had been ripped open from the inside, as if they'd fled from something in terror. Scattered across the snow, some bodies lay barefoot and half-dressed, despite the brutal sub-zero temperatures. One hiker had a shattered skull, another had crushed ribs, and a woman's body was found with her eyes missing and her tongue torn out. There were no signs of struggle, no footprints but their own. The Soviet investigation gave no answers, only a chilling conclusion. They died from a compelling natural force. January 23, 1959. Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old radio engineering student, leads a group of 9 from the Ural Polytechnic Institute. Their goal? A ski trek to Mount Torton, deep in Russia's Ural Mountains. All were skilled, experienced in survival, and excited to face nature's challenge. They never made it back. The last known contact came from the remote village of Vijay, the northernmost point of civilization before the vast snow-covered wilderness. From there, they ventured toward Mount Torton, their intended destination. Along the way, one member, Yuri Yudin, turned back due to illness, a decision that would ultimately save his life. The rest pressed on into the harsh terrain, logging their journey through photos and diary entries, right up until they disappeared. They were expected to return by February 12th, but as that day passed with no sign of the group, worry began to creep in. At first, authorities were slow to respond, but when days turned into a week, families demanded answers. A search party was finally launched, initially made up of volunteer students and teachers from the university, later joined by soldiers and police with helicopters and rescue dogs. What they would uncover on the slopes of Kholat-Syakhl, known by the local Mansi people as Dead Mountain, would become one of the most enduring mysteries of the 20th century. On February 26, 1959, deep in the icy slopes of Kholat-Syakhl, rescuers finally spotted something jutting out of the snow. It was the hiker's tent, collapsed and nearly buried. But what they found as they approached was not just unusual. It was disturbing. The tent canvas had been slashed open from the inside, not unzipped or torn by the elements. As they peeled back the frozen fabric, they found the hikers' boots, warm clothing, food, maps, and even money, all left behind, undisturbed. It was as if the group had fled suddenly, in sheer panic, without taking even the bare essentials needed to survive the brutal cold. Then came the footprints. A trail of prints led away from the tent, some barefoot, some wearing only socks, and others with a single shoe. But what was truly strange was the pattern. They didn't suggest a frantic escape, but rather a slow, measured walk toward the dark tree line nearly a mile downhill. It was as though the group had walked calmly into their own demise. As the rescuers followed the tracks into the forest, the first bodies were discovered near a tall Siberian cedar tree. Yuri Krivonishenko and Georgy Doroshenko lay beneath it, shoeless and stripped to their underwear, with burns on their hands and legs. The tree above was broken and scarred, its lower branches snapped off, as if someone had tried frantically to climb it, either to escape something or to see it. A few hundred meters uphill, 3 more bodies were found: Igor Dyatlov, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin, positioned as though they'd been attempting to crawl back toward the tent. Slobodin had a fractured skull, but no signs of a struggle around him. All had died of hypothermia, but in strange positions, with injuries that didn't quite make sense in the context of simple exposure. At this point, 4 hikers were still missing, and when they were finally found 2 months later, buried beneath several feet of snow in a ravine, the mystery would only grow darker. It wasn't until May 4th, more than 2 months after the initial discoveries, that searchers located the last 4 bodies. They were buried under nearly 4 meters of hard-packed snow in a ravine just beyond the forest, as if they had fallen or taken shelter in a shallow gully. But their condition was drastically different from the others. These weren't just deaths from cold, they were violent. Lyudmila Dubinina had suffered massive chest trauma, her ribs shattered, and most shockingly, her tongue, eyes, and part of her lips were missing. The autopsy stated that her injuries were so severe they could only have been caused by a force comparable to a car crash. Nikolai Thibault Brignol had a crushed skull with injuries suggesting a tremendous blow, again, with no external wounds to match the internal damage. Semyon Zolotaryov, the oldest member, had broken ribs and was strangely found wearing 2 watches and clothing belonging to other hikers, as if the survivors had tried to share resources before the end. The last, Alexander Kolovatov, also showed signs of severe trauma. Oddly, some of the clothing tested positive for radiation. Though not enough to cause death, it raised even more questions. There were no signs of a struggle, no other footprints, no avalanche debris, no conclusive cause. The Soviet investigation closed quickly, blaming the deaths on a vague, compelling natural force. The case files were sealed, and whispers of military involvement, secret weapons tests, or paranormal activity began to spread like wildfire. To this day, no one truly knows what caused 9 experienced hikers to flee into the freezing night and meet such a horrifying end. During the Soviet investigation, traces of radiation were reportedly found on the clothing of 2 of the hikers, specifically Semyon Zolotaryov and Alexander Kolovatov. These were not high enough to cause death or acute illness, but they were unusual enough to raise eyebrows, especially since radiation testing was not standard procedure in such investigations. Here's what's important. The levels weren't lethal, but they were above normal background radiation. Some of the hikers, particularly Zolotaryov and Kolovatov, had military backgrounds or had worked in fields related to radioactive materials. Kolovatov had worked at a nuclear institute. The Soviet government classified the case files for decades, which fueled suspicions of a military cover-up or exposure to radioactive weapons testing. That said, no conclusive link between the radiation and the cause of death has ever been proven. Some theorists believe they may have accidentally stumbled into a test zone, possibly involving parachute mines, which explode above ground, causing massive internal injuries without external damage. Some eyewitnesses reported seeing orange orbs or explosions in the sky during that time. The files were classified with Soviet secrecy, and when released, parts were missing or heavily redacted. Some rescue workers were reportedly told to keep quiet. The internal injuries, shattered ribs, crushed skulls, match high-impact shockwave trauma consistent with mine or bomb detonations. The orderly footprints may reflect military-style discipline or confusion during a chemical or radiation exposure. However, no bomb fragments or chemical residue were found. The Soviets never officially admitted to any test in the area, and modern Russian investigations, including a 2019 one, officially concluded that an avalanche or natural force was to blame, though few are convinced. The Yeti theory took off after a 2013 Russian documentary claimed that the hikers had been attacked by a menk, a sort of Siberian Yeti or abominable snowman. The documentary even pointed to a photo from one of the hikers' cameras, which appeared to show a tall, dark humanoid figure in the woods. The photo is grainy, out of focus, and almost certainly a shadow or one of the hikers dressed in dark clothing. But that didn't stop media outlets and mystery enthusiasts from running with it. There's zero evidence of animal tracks, no blood trails, and no injuries consistent with a bear or wild animal mauling. Also, Siberian Yetis aren't a recognized part of the local folklore in that region, so the theory relies heavily on Western pop culture. But despite all that, the idea of a mysterious creature in a snowy wilderness has captured public imagination. And some fans even call the Dyatlov mystery Russia's Blair Witch story. The UFO theory is slightly harder to dismiss, mainly because multiple witnesses from nearby villages, particularly in Ivdel and north of Sverdlovsk, did report seeing strange orange orbs or lights in the sky during the night of the hiker's disappearance. Some of these reports came from local villagers, meteorological station workers, and other groups of hikers in the region. Descriptions varied. Some said they looked like fireballs or glowing spheres moving in odd directions across the sky. These accounts were not widely published until after the fall of the Soviet Union, due to tight government censorship at the time. But again, the physical evidence just isn't there. No burns were found on the tent or environment, and the injuries don't suggest a laser or heat-based weapon. The only thing that loosely connects the sightings to the hikers is timing. The lights were reportedly seen around the same night or shortly before the group vanished. What do you think really happened that night? Was it fear, nature, or something beyond explanation? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your theory. If unraveling eerie unsolved mysteries is your kind of journey, give this video a like and subscribe for more haunting tales from the edge of the unknown. Until next time, see you on the next one.